Today I would like to talk about how do we experience the corrupt self. Most of the people think that they aren't corrupt, they have no distortions, they have no issues in life, and yet if they are honest enough, they realize that every point of their life is suffering. And this suffering is the experience of the corrupt self. So it's not really, the suffering is not an explanation. The suffering is inner perception. The suffering is something that causes us misalignment, which makes us feel out of the natural flow. What does it mean to be in the natural flow? It means to be healthy, to be balanced. To be healthy and balanced means painless existence, a blissful existence. And so the experience of the corrupt self is nothing else but the experience of this pain and suffering. And we are taught that pain and suffering are natural, that aging and decay and unnatural death in agony is but natural, and yet it is not so. This is the very experience of the corrupt self, because we can't know the corruption but through pain and agony of this existence. So when we experience pain and agony, we know that we are the corrupt self. When we align, when we experience balance, we are that natural blissful self. And when we are the natural and blissful self, life does not seem to slip away from our, or out of our hands or out of our body, because we are intact, we are content. Many people speak about contentment and bliss, and yet they experience it only in glimpses. To be content means to be in the state of eternal being. If you look at the creation and how each element within this creation experiences time or lifespan, you will see that the way you experience lifespan today is different from your being that will be evolved in some time, and how that evolved being will be experiencing the time span or the lifespan or the time, the flow of time. The flow of time itself is limited by the corruption, because the corruption consumes the energy of life, and that process of consumption is called the loss of life rather than the flow of life, because at the moment we experience the corrupt self and the loss of the vital energy, which is called life. But is it really life? In ancient times, people were crying when someone was born, and they were rejoicing when someone was gone or left the body. Because, and in ancient times, meaning already in this Kali Yuga, when people realize that being here in the corrupt state is nothing but suffering, is nothing but living that process of energy loss. And so when we, during the life, realize how to preserve energy, how to restore true vitality and come back to one's authentic natural state of being, which is the content being that doesn't lose energy, we realize the joy of life. If we haven't come to this realization, our life seems to be a constant struggle, just passing time until the energy is gone and we have no other choice but decay, decompose, and be pushed by the pain out of the body in agony. That is not true death. People rejoiced when someone left the body because they didn't leave that body in agony. So the actual essence, the spiritual essence of death, or liberation in other words, was always about conscious departure. When one experiences this world for a time being, but one never loses one's contact or connection, the eternal connection with the eternal being or the eternal self. And that's why one focuses and maintains that awareness of the eternal self even while living in this body or while being in the body during the so-called process of life. And even while being in the body, one does not need to struggle or suffer. But the experience of the corrupt self is such that we do not live because we are most of the time discontent. And so life has become a process of suffering. And that's why we've discovered or created philosophies and religions which are trying to give us a solution how to escape from the suffering. These religions and spiritual solutions would have been irrelevant in other yugas when the perception of life is different. And yet they're relevant to our current existence, and we fall for them even though they're corrupt, limited, delusional at times, because our focus is on suffering and how to resolve this suffering. But the solution is very simple. The solution is refocusing. When we discover inner self, that content, wholesome being, by refocusing within, we experience absorption. We experience wholesomeness. And this is the true awakening. Because there is no awakening without experiencing this wholesome self, this natural being, without the restoration of the natural flow. And all these words are useless until we experience this within ourselves. True natural spirituality is or has only one purpose: to invoke this experience so that one can restore easily this natural being and cultivate it. The more we cultivate this being, the more chance we have to dissolve unhealthy connections with the projected reality. And not only the projected world, but also the man-made reality, which has emotional context, mental concepts, conceptual context. And so by cultivating self, we create a healthy relationship with the world, with the projection, with whatever we experience, without leaving a sense of self in that projected reality, or without creating an artificial sense of self in that projected reality or through that projected reality. And so we can live freely in a liberated state. And when we live freely, we are nothing but our authentic, content, natural being with its natural flow, and life is experienced differently. Time becomes an eternity, and the idea of disease, decay, and death gradually dissolves. So evolution means change in perception of time, change in perception of energy and inner frequency, which allows one to perceive the projected reality and oneself in that projected reality on different levels, differently from what the majority of people experience at this point of time. Thank you.